Hello and welcome to the Intersection, new live show here on Labour Social. We're doing it live because the last episode we did last week, me and Rachel, with our friend India Willoughby, Willoughby, I ended up having to edit it, and I let stupid Zoom go between whoever was speaking, right? And when I ran it back, it took a frame of footage. It dropped a frame every time the camera changed. So I had to go through the hour-long interview and take out a single frame every, few seconds.
Oh my goodness. And
so we're going to do it live. We're doing it
balloons.
Live.
We're talking about some tough stuff, and it was all these balloons kept going.
Yeah. that was Zoom, wasn't it? If you put like two fingers up to Zoom, balloons come up. But we're using Google Meet here, so might work a little bit better. So, Rachel, do you want to tell us a little bit about the intersection and what it's going to be about?
Yeah, so hoping that some of the people in the chat might contribute their ideas. But the idea is to, obviously, I'm trans and I talk about trans, but it would be nice to do the intersection interviewing, getting people on to talk about not just trans, but LGBT, Black rights, gender, disability, and go right across the spectrum and the intersection. And its relationship with Labour and what's Labour doing and what the Tories aren't doing, and connect it all and do it in a way that we can find, I am really comfortable about talking about trans stuff. But when I start talking about racial heritage or disability, I'm a little bit out of water as well. So I want to talk to people who are experts in that, find out what their take on it is, what, who their idols are, what's going wrong in the UK, what's going well, what could Labour do, who their heroes are, what their optimism is. And that's what we'd like the intersection to be. But I'd be really interested to hear from people in the chat what they'd also like to see, or questions they would like us to ask as well. That would be really cool. So that's where we are with it. So it's an evolution. I'm going to always have a set pace of questions so we can get the same kind of feedback from each of the things, the heroes, the things that are going on, trying to use the same questions to get a sort of format, but obviously get questions from people in the chat put to the interviewees as well. And I will be as out of water as some of you on some of the topics. So, we'll learn together. That's the idea.
Yeah. And we're hoping to get people like the Fox Fisher in Brighton to come on the show. Also, Patty Stevenson. Spoke to her today. She's the young woman who was pinned down by the police at the Sarah Everard vigil, and she's going to come on and talk about aspects of feminism. She's a very strong trans ally, by the way, as well.
Yeah,
she's very, very irate with people who, casual transphobia. Yeah. She just does not have any time for it.
Yeah.
So lots to look forward to. Supertansky said she wants to be on the show as well.
Oh, fantastic!
So that'll be really cool in the coming weeks.
It could be a swear. It could be a swear jar and intersection all at the same time.
Swear jar, intersection, crossover. But let's first of all talk about what was on the thumbnail here, which is the rise of transphobia.
Yeah.
So how long's it been since you transitioned?
End of the 90s.
End of the 90s. You've seen it all the way through.
Well, I was out in London I was out on the scene in London in 1990.
Yeah.
But I wasn't out at work. And then as time went on, I became more and more driven to be out more. And then, I sort of came out of work and then started treatment at the end of the 90s. And I transitioned, in my profession. It was, and you know what? And it is something that we've gone from I always say that in the 90s, it was, we weren't as visible. We were there. The clubs were packed. You go down to the city of London and hit all the clubs on a Saturday night, packed with trans and non-binary people. We weren't as visible, but we were there. And people didn't really understand it. So, you would get the usual street bigotry and the occasional attack, but it wasn't, even when I was out in London at 3 o'clock in the morning or down in Soho having a cup of coffee, you felt okay. And then, as time has gone on, we have had, I think it was 1999, the first protections coming into the Sex Discrimination Act for trans people in the workplace. And then the Gender Recognition Act and the Equality Act and better healthcare. and things have always moved, rights always move forward, and we've always been in that, as a trans woman, I think it kind of, I think around 2015 we were really riding a high up to about, I think around 2016 transgender was word of the year, and it was all going well, and it was
the
about
wheels really did come off everything in 2016, didn't it?
It did, yeah, and that was because quite a number of factors. One was Trump, obviously. Trumpism came in, and when America gets a cold, United Kingdom sneezes, and so we're heavily affected by that. And because same-sex marriage and everything was got ahead in America, and all that kind of stuff, I think, and we've said this before, I think one of the dark think tanks in America sat down and said, right, we've lost gay rights. What can we do? And I think a decision was made. Let's start attacking the lowest hanging fruit on the tree, trans rights. They never really established them. Let's go there. And so that started, their roadmap is, trans kids care, trans adults care, then it will be, and we know the roadmap is then same-sex marriage and women's rights. Yeah. And we can talk about that a bit later. But we saw that, and that came washed over. Over here, the Theresa May government announced the LGBT consultation, which they never acted on, but they did it, and it had a lot of responses. And self-ID, which over 23, 24 countries have, and Theresa May announced that they were going to look at that as well. And we were really happy about that, because the Gender Recognition Act was very smelly. It's very binary. You don't have to have any medical procedures for it, but it's kind of assumption that there probably has to be, and there's a committee you don't meet, and it's expensive, and it's a hassle, and only 7,000 of these things have been issued, and so not very popular. And so we needed something that was a little bit more flexible. People know who they are. They who you are as a person, and self-ID seemed to be the way to go forward. Now we've had that. We've got it in Ireland, where I'm from. And so we thought, great, self-ID, we're rocking now. And then this is where the sort of American stuff washes over, and up comes a few of these lovely groups in the UK that start to talk about, men will declare themselves as women, and you get into toilets because, as the toilet sign is the thing that's been stopping them all this time, and ridiculous. So we suddenly start to see the right-wing newspapers, the Times, Telegraph, Daily Mail, all those papers, they suddenly step up to sort of 10,000 articles in 2 year, kind of absolutely putrid articles about men declaring themselves as women, obsessing about one trans prisoner, really just a tsunami. And of course, in the 23 other countries that have self-ID, that's never happened, because a man doesn't have to declare himself as a woman, change their birth certificate, change their bank details, change all their credit cards, mess up their whole pensions and everything to attack a woman. They're just going to do that. And they're not going to declare themselves as women to do it. They hate women. They don't want to become one. So they're not going to do that. But, and as I say, 23 countries, that's never happened. But so this whole argument, when you think about it, but they start bringing out all this, these weird websites popping up with trans women on, and all the crimes they commit and all this rubbish. And, there are trans people do commit crime, but not at the, certainly not at the rate that non-trans people do. And yet, the fake figures that run in and out of Parliament that we see is just really frightening. And it's an orchestrated, well-funded machine to basically demonize and exclude trans people. And the battlegrounds was self-ID, which we've lost in England and Wales, and then Scotland went ahead because they're more progressive, felt more progressive. They have been bounced out, obviously, by the Westminster.
By Westminster. But also, I mean, there are people in Scotland who, and a big part of this for me, like I think like most people, like I didn't really think too much about trans people. They were people who existed. I had some friends who were trans. I didn't really think it was a particular issue. And then suddenly this weird thing happened. And like I say, it was about 8 years ago. That you had people like Graham Linehan and J.K. Rowling, people who for their whole lives had just been, seen as progressives, seen as
Yeah.
people who are on our side on many of these debates, Brexit, the Tories being evil, all that kind of stuff. And they woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, seemingly going, "Oh my God, trans people exist," and nothing's been the same since.
Yeah, I think so it's a perfect storm. America, Trumpism, Boris being, allowing the right of his party to run wild, these groups forming, and there are about 20 anti-trans, protecting women's rights, but the numbers aren't large, and they all seem to be the same people when you look at the Twitter analysis, and then the formation of the LGBT Alliance, and all that fun all came into this, the articles in the newspapers were relentless, and the public acceptance of trans was really, really high. But if you have, it's been since 2016, so we're in 8 years of press negativity about trans people. BBC have been pretty putrid about trans. You could see the acceptance of trans rights has fallen, whereas LGBT people, it's kind of still around the same. And you're seeing this repeated demonization. The battlegrounds are, think of the children, hospitals, prisons. They don't care about women's prisons at all. Women are the mental health in women's prisons, in all that stuff. You don't see any of these groups fighting for women's rights in prisons about any other issue. And most of all these 19 groups protecting women's rights, all of their output is anti-trans, is just against trans women in the main. So these prisons, hospitals, sport, obviously, and it's just not about, and in sport, it's not about fairness, because they talk about chess and snooker and darts. Well, what are you saying there? So we are seeing this battleground to exclude. And the fact is, and trans people, and I've said this on the social on Friday, trans people are shouting, "Women, don't attack us. This is about you. Gay people, LGBT people, don't attack us. This is about you." Yeah. We are the low-hanging fruit. If you, as trans people were there during the Stonewall riots and then were ignored afterwards, we are here for you now. Don't ignore us, because if we're not there, LGBT rights will fall, and then if they fall, women's rights will fall, and black rights. And you're seeing that in America in super fast time. It's playing at double speed. Women's rights, trans rights, LGBT rights, they rise together or they fall together. I say this again and again. In Spain, in Ireland, where I'm from, trans rights, LGBT rights, women's rights came very quickly together. Same in Spain, together. Finland, together. But they're falling like a stone in the red states in America. And you don't think that's going to happen here. We've already got the protection zones around abortion clinics in UK, and there are articles popping in articles, well, we need to ask questions. And we're just seeing that whole domino effect here in the UK. And trans people are the canary in the mine. We are getting battered, and we're seeing silence from an awful lot of people at the moment. And I don't know how long we can hang on. It feels like Custer's last stand for a lot of us at the moment.
Yeah, and no surprise. I mean, this is a news story that I'm going to share. You should be able to see this as well, Rachel. This is from Sky News yesterday about a teacher sacked for refusing to use transgender students' chosen pronouns. This is the way that they choose to make the headline of this. Yeah. Most people aren't going to read the article. They're just going to see that and they'll go, God, that's so unreasonable. And then you drill down into the actual article. And this teacher who wouldn't accept that a student wanted to be addressed by a boy's name and with male pronouns, instead of doing that, actually ended up just, instead of using the name that the boy asked this teacher to use for them, the hearing was told that during lessons, Mr. Lister would point at student A rather than use their preferred pronouns. Like, school is such an intense experience for the vast majority of us anyway. To treat a student in that way, to bully them, to belittle them in front of their peers, in front of their class. As a teacher, you got to stop being a teacher. You shouldn't be a teacher if you treat your students like that. This isn't a game. And The one thing that I always try and come back to when I'm discussing this kind of thing with people who are openly transphobic, apart from the whole like, what's it got to do with you, which is a great question to ask. But the other thing is the amount of pressure, and you sort of alluded to this a moment ago, the mental health pressure put on trans people, especially young trans people, by all this transphobia in the media coming up every day on Twitter. There's hashtag JK Rowling, hashtag trans, hashtag TERFs, hashtag every single. There's nothing else in the world to talk about.
Yeah, I know, and the fact is that you look at the census in the UK. 1% of the UK of Generation Z is probably on the gender identity spectrum, 1 in 100 people, and then it's like 0.75 for millennials, and we are a very small number of people, but we don't have a voice to defend ourselves. So it's easy to kick. It's easy to be a political football, and these people, and I do believe that people become obsessed. They suddenly, it starts with trans and then it starts with other things. And I often tell allies to go and look at the Twitter accounts of the people that are obsessed with trans people. You have to look through them, but it's not just trans. In companies, when somebody stands up and says, I don't like trans people, in a way, I feel that a person might be a member of the KKK, or they might be a flat earther or something, and they would never take that into the workplace and say that in the workplace, but they will talk about their horrible trans views. And in a way, it's a good way for companies to go, well, actually, what else do you do? If this is your view, what else do you have going on? I'm not saying everybody that hates trans people has other awful views, but if you look at social media of some of these people, there's all sorts of weird stuff on there. I think that, but they just become so obsessed. And I think that's, social media does that to you. As I think, and I've said this on the social, that I think political parties in lots of countries are further apart because of social media. I think that social media goes, if you don't like trans people, maybe you're like Nazis, because the algorithm gives you and makes you more angry and drives us further apart. The rise of the incel movement. We've got men against women now in a lot of countries, and in the UK, as you saw, the incel movement, the inclusion of men. They've been as inclusive as women in the UK up to very recently, and it's just tipping away now. And that's social media that's done that. It's unraveling society. It's a clear and present danger. And
transphobia is a gateway drug.
It is. It's a really good way of describing it. Yeah, it is.
Wait to see the hard stuff.
Yeah. Oh, you want to be a bigot? Let's start with a bit of transphobia. Let's get you started. Right. So here's the people you need to follow, and this is the sort of stuff you need to say. These are the phrases.
Fisher-Price bigotry.
Yeah, it is.
I first sort of came across this, and this was probably before I'd seen any of the JK Rowling stuff. So this is probably in the late 2010s, and there was a lot of people that I was friends with through my campaigning against Brexit, and I was friends with them on Facebook. I maybe saw them at events and marches and things. By the way, I'm going to be in Liverpool at the National Rejoin March. I'll be speaking along with Femi and Madalena Kay at the Pier Head at 2:00. The march starts at 12:00 from St George's Hall. Please come join us. The weather might be a bit rubbish, but we're going to go to the pub afterwards. So I'll make it a Labour social event afterwards. But yeah, I remember I was friends with some people I didn't really know, but we had like 200 people in common, and we all had EU flags on our avatars and things, on our profile pics. And I remember this woman, she kept on every day posting stuff about trans people. And I remember writing to her, are you trans?
Yeah.
And she went, no. And I went, why are you obsessed? Like, what's going on? Can you explain it to me? And suddenly all this stuff came out, like this vile transphobia, this ridiculous lies upon lies upon lies about all the terrible things that trans people do. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, my beef is with Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson, because they've actually ruined my life. Trans people have never done anything bad to me, ever. I don't get, and she'll probably respond, "Yeah, that's because you're a man. You. Of course, they're not going to do anything bad to you." And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, female friends have friends who are trans as well, and I mean, but you mentioned it earlier about the toilets. I mean, there used to be murders and rapes, and then they segregated the toilets into male and female toilets.
Yeah.
In about 1890, and then all murders and rapes stopped. It was a remarkable achievement of mankind, humankind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's nothing to be feared from trans people, not making it about toilets, but we just want to get in and go in, pee and poo, and get out really quickly. And I'm all, 25 years later, 26 years later, I'm still really nervous to use a loo, and I just want to get in and out. It's just not. And there are cubicles. I don't know if anybody's ever been in a loo, but there are these things called cubicles, and when you lock the door, it's floor to ceiling. So whatever you're doing in there, it's not bothering anybody else. So I don't know. I think it's just a battleground. It's back to. But what in the UK right now, what they're trying to do is that you saw it in the famous ferrets case on Friday, is to try and say, oh, we just want to tidy up the Equality Act because sex is a bit undefined, isn't it? So we just want to define sex as biological, and then that will make it nice and tidy. But it's like, well, if you do that then could exclude trans people from single sex spaces. And the Equality Act already allows organizations to do that, but through a legitimate to achieve a legitimate aim. But I mean, most don't, because they respect trans women as women. But because it's usually always about trans women we're talking about, but this affects trans guys as well and non-binary people. But it's this I feel sorry. There are a lot of people who have gone through the process. They're living their lives, and suddenly they'll find they won't be able to drive anything. Won't be able to get in the car and drive 3 hours in any direction because they won't be able to stop and use the loo. Or they won't be able to fly to another country because they'll go to the airport. They won't be allowed to use the loo till they get on the plane, which, by the way, everybody uses on the plane. But it's just ridiculous, exclusionary. It will upset the lives of a lot of people. I have lots of friends who transitioned a long time ago, living their life quietly. They're not out. What are they suddenly going to do? You're just imprisoning them. And that won't get covered. Nobody will think about that if that. Luckily, as you know, the ferrets beat Liz Truss on Friday, but
that's glorious.
It was a glorious thing. But you know what? Even then, what wasn't widely covered was they were all kicking off on social media that the Labour, and actually, to be fair, Conservative MPs filibustered alongside to stop this horrible bill passing. But they did exactly the same thing on conversion therapy the week before.
Sarah in the chat says, they never discuss trans men because it completely unravels their transphobia.
Yeah,
absolutely. But I'm going to just talk a little bit about the sort of, it's about it being a gateway drug. I always imagine it a bit like, you were talking earlier about they felt they lost the war against gay people, and once gay marriage was allowed. In many countries around the world, especially the US and the UK. They've lost what can we move on to? What can be our focus now? Because these people are, they're sad, lonely people with a lot of money who just need someone to hate or something to do. Also, busybodies, essentially. They want to go into your bedroom and go, no, you're doing it wrong. And these people have been around since forever. Now, in the 1920s in America, they banned alcohol. It went down like a cup of cold sick, and it just ended up making billions of dollars for gangsters, starting the whole mob, kicking them all off. A lot of people died. A lot of people died as a result of from being shot by gangsters or drinking bootleg liquor, which wasn't fit for human consumption or whatever it was. And then in the early 30s, they back-heeled it because they realized it was a terrible, terrible idea. And at that moment, the group of people who wanted alcohol to be illegal for everyone, I don't want it, but I want my rules to apply to you as well. They moved to drugs. They moved to drugs, and that's why you got movies like Reefer Madness and things like that. And all these drugs that used to be legal. I mean, heroin was legal in the First World War. You could get a little leather pouch with heroin in it, with a needle and a little tourniquet thing to wrap around your arm, and you could send it off to the boys in the trenches. Like
Wow.
a little monogram on the leather pouch. Here you go, lads. Have some heroin before you go and run into no man's land.
Jeez.
With nothing to protect you. But yeah, so, and then to bring it more up to date. So
Yeah.
I grew up in the 80s. I'm a little bit younger than you, only a little bit.
Oh.
I grew up under Section 28, where I was in an all-boys school for 5 years, and I couldn't talk about, if any of us fancied men. Was that normal? Was that, if we fantasized about having sex with a man? Was that normal? No, we couldn't talk about that. We can't talk about that. And so, and Section 28 wasn't repealed until like 2003.
Yeah, it was quite a long late.
Yeah,
everyone thinks it was a lot before, but it wasn't.
Surprisingly late. But growing up in that environment, especially in the 80s, when I was very young, with AIDS and people using it as something to bash gay people with, and say, "Oh, you're spreading this terrible disease, you bastards! How dare you!" And also, we had the same sort of fear of going into a bathroom and a gay man being there, and he might chop off your willy, or he might he might try and bum you, and this is the sort of thing that kids were all told by each other. Do you know what I mean? But it's society putting that on them, and now we're seeing the same thing again. It's like, oh no, there's one of those trans women in the toilets. They'll do things to you, And it's just like. This is freaky. I feel like I'm watching the same episode of something again. I'm like, I'm sure I've seen this before.
It's Telemetry, isn't it? The needle goes to the start of the record and we all start out like before. Boom. But it is exactly the same. I remember it, you used to get, everything was gay at school in the 70s when I was at school, and you were called gay as a derogatory thing because nobody knew any gay people and nobody knew much about it. Because if you ever said anything to a teacher, they would clam up because they were worried. They weren't allowed to talk about it.
They could lose their jobs. They could lose their jobs.
So it was, so emotionally, educationally, kids were quite stunted coming out of schools, because we didn't know much, and then in my adulthood, I met gay people and LGBT people. And that's when I found my people, I was like, where the hell have you been for the last 18 years? And it was like that. Yeah. And so it is that recycling of, you're seeing in, we shouldn't be teaching trans ideology in school, Section 28. That's where it starts. And that's what they're talking about again now. Yeah. And that is kind of frightening. But the whole pedophile, groomer, all that rubbish, that is just, that's out of the Republican playbook. But we hear that, that's here. When I wrote to my MP, he said, "Oh, women do need to be protected from trans people." It's like, really? What? How is that? And that is the thing that you find really kind of shocking. This whole, it's just so old, and you think that people don't believe it, but people on social media get it fed all the time, and we just need to protect women's rights. But you're saying trans women or trans guys are a risk, that is not the case.
It's a very good point. That is the big difference that I've seen from what I grew up with, which was this conflation, and especially amongst my dad's generation. My dad is a bit older, his generation sort of, they were born just before the war, so they grew up literally in the war, and they're a bit strange. They're called the silent generation, and they're a bit odd in their attitudes. And one of the things that they had drilled into them, and not from a religious point of view necessarily, was that there was no difference between gay men and pedophiles. They were child abusers, straight up. If they would do that to another man, they would do that to a child. And it's taken a long time for society to move on from that mentality. And again, with trans people, it's, oh, would someone think of the children? And it always comes down to, oh my God, these children are being given these drugs, they're having men come along and doing horrific things to them in a surgical, someone compared, so this is horrible, and I'm sorry if this is a bit triggering for anyone, but they compared going through gender realignment surgery to female genital mutilation. And I'm like, there's no comparison. What the hell is wrong with you? That is, But the big difference now that between sort of the 80s and now on this is you've still got that underlying when someone think of the children, but now you've also got it conflated with feminism, and you never had that in the 80s. The gay rights and feminism went hand in hand; they went lockstep.
That's only here.
Oh,
that's so generally, no. I mean, in America, it's more political attacks on, Republicans on trans, but generally a lot of feminist movement in America is generally still trying to be quite inclusive. In Ireland, where I'm from, the feminist movement is inclusive. They do include, and they threw gender critical activists. I mean, that's what I always joke with you. Gender critical activists from the United Kingdom went over to Ireland to tell their gender critical activists how to be gender critical. One thing you can't do when you're English is come to Ireland and tell us how to be. We're not really big on that anymore, and it's and they basically threw them out. And the feminism movement in Ireland is pretty good. And our newspapers are still report the news pretty. We got the Irish Times. I don't think it's pretty good, obviously, but most of them are pretty good. And
our Murdoch paper, the Irish Times.
I think it is, yeah.
Oh,
and so we're holding our own in Ireland. And Scotland is much the same. Feminism. I mean, there's some horrible groups in Scotland, but there's a lot of good feminist groups in England still trying, but they're just shouted out by well-funded groups because of our relationship with America. But if you go to France, even in Italy, or you go across Western Europe, there's feminism. They don't really. It's kind of including trans women, because we face the same issues.
Yeah.
And what we're not doing is going around attacking women. And so
this is why we want to call this the intersection. This is about intersectionality, because it affects everyone.
Yeah.
So if people are going to be discriminatory against trans people and what bathrooms they use, it is a very slippery slope to becoming discriminatory against disabled people. And oh my God, what we have a separate toilet for disabled people. Oh, we can't be having that.
But
it should be up to people's own consciousness to put in a disabled ramp.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt. There's a slight delay. But it is that it's a lot of this is that it is a political decision, because I am sure that I'm not and I'll be honest, we've talked about this. I don't think Labour's going to be happy clappy for trans people, but I don't think it's going to get any worse. Yeah. Though I'm going to work very hard with you on this channel to make sure that they are better. But I do think that this government in particular, it's like the recent in the budget, that people with disability who are working at home have got to look for a job to work at home, and if they don't, they're going to lose like over £4,500 of benefit. I mean, that is, why don't you just tax somebody rich instead of going after somebody whose life is pretty damn hard? The attack on. The report from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, we don't have racism in the United Kingdom. Well, you do if you're a Tory donor, by the sound of it. But, otherwise we don't. But we do, of course we do. But it's the rhetoric of attacking trans people. We're attacking disabled people with racial heritage. We're seeing these constant attack. I always thought, if you're right wing, sure, it's just, I thought it was small government and low tax. Why does it have to be all this other stuff?
Yeah.
I disagree with you on small government and no tax, but that's another thing. But why do you have to have all this other rubbish that you bring? Is it just deflection, or is it because the people that want that are also bigots? What is the reason that motivates you to be all this horrible? If Tyson, all his horrible policies, if he loved trans people and he didn't have all these funny nasty sort of anti-inclusion policies, maybe he would get more people supporting his party. I would hate his policies, but I don't understand why it is that when you are a right-wing party that wants low taxes and small government, is it a lie that actually they want big government and control, and therefore they want to control everybody? Or is it really is small taxes and low government, but this bigotry and nastiness comes with it?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
But if you are a transphobe and a feminist, you're on the same side as people who use the term feminazi.
Yeah.
And you should take a moment. I know I said this about Brexit, and I'll say it about the transphobia that's in the air at the moment. Have a look around. See who's on the same team as you. Do you want these people on the same team as you?
Yeah.
Because if you are transphobic, you are on the same team as Trump. You're on the same team as Liz Truss. You're on the same team as Vladimir frickin' Putin. You're in the same team as Hitler. I don't know. I'm going to go Godwin here, but it's worth stating that the first, government that turned against trans people were the Nazis.
well, the first books burnt were outside that clinic in Berlin, which were
Yeah.
about, so yeah, I mean, and just saying that, and you see people saying that trans people weren't and LGBT people weren't part of their the Nazis killing regime, which of course we were, with gypsies and Jewish people. They were all part of that. But people are now denying LGBT people were even part of that, and that frightens me, that people are trying to rewrite history. And I think that's because almost everybody from the Second World War has passed now, and we are forgetting our history very quickly.
Oh yeah.
And that again is incredibly worrying.
But so we've got the situation we're in now is, I mean, I find it heartbreaking and horrific. I can't even begin to imagine what it's like for you, for other people watching this who are trans, who are having to live through this period of our times when they are public enemy number one for no reason whatsoever, except bigots gonna bigot.
I mean, I mean, I can tell you what it feels like. It has, and my, most of my trans friends and non-binary friends, it's ruining my life. I'm in my upper 50s. I'm coming near to retirement, well, near-ish. I want to retire. I can't afford to retire, but obviously, I do a job that I enjoy, but it's becoming less joyful. The BBC, Radio 4 in the morning, anti-trans article, you get the newspapers, the attacks, the corporate world in which I work in, the attacks on DEI now, the gender critical belief in the workplace in the UK, the street attack, the hate increase on the violence against trans people in the UK. We've had one death. We've had a serious stabbing. We are getting, the attacks against all LGBT people are rising. Everybody in your life has a view on how you live your life. You can be at dinner and they'll say, "Oh, I love trans people. I don't think you should be doing sport though." Or, I support trans people, but not the kids, right? Everybody has an opinion on you because it's in every bloody newspaper. And I think that's the problem. It is frightening. Sometimes at my worst day, I think, one day I'm going to end up in some horrible camp and, they're going to come for me. That's sometimes on my darkest day. I think and nobody's going to say anything and it's not going to stop. On my better days, I look, Gen Z's coming, they vote. We are just about to have 5 years of, maybe hopefully 10 years of Labour. We are fighting back. I know that you don't agree with me, but Trump is going to lose. And I think America is going to change. We're seeing far right parties in Argentina collapsing. The guy in Holland didn't get. So I'm seeing optimism there. And I have to believe that we are going to win, because the other way, the darkness. And I think that, and Emma says, how do you cope with that? My wife is brilliant. She's trans as well. She is brilliant because, she's, a lot of people say, how do you cope with it? How do you cope with your mental health? I said, I don't. I put a lid on it and I am going to pay the piper sometime down the line. I have to get on, and every trans and non-binary and person in the UK is an activist and campaigner right now, because they have to be. We're fighting for our lives.
Do you know what?
And we will win. We will win.
I hope you don't mind me making this parallel, but I see it as a bit like being an EU citizen. It's something that we didn't think anyone would have to fight for. It was just something that existed, and it was fine.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, a lot of people had a problem with it all at once because Rupert Murdoch told them that was a public enemy number one. And it was very interesting that you pointed out 2016, because that was the year, obviously, of the Brexit fraud referendum. So for years, they've been saying, the EU are trying to straighten our bananas. The EU are trying to make our condoms smaller. The EU are going to take away your cup of tea. Literally, that is an advert they put out. The EU is going to take away your cup of tea and kill the polar bears while they're at it. And that sounds like I'm being hyperbolic there, but I'm not. That's what literally the adverts they put out. And then suddenly they're like, okay, so we won that one. Who do we blame now? Who should we go after? And it's trans people and asylum seekers.
Yeah,
because
and in country,
two groups that are minorities with very little power, very little sway in society. So,
and I think, and I agree, and I think I think LGBT community were like, and most of us were kind of when we came out of Europe, because we had a lot of protections from Europe, that this country doesn't have to adhere to, and it feels. I mean, it is this rights thing. The attack on the European Court of Human Rights is the next battleground if this party if this, God forbid, they remain in power, because it stops, the dark money that's flowing into the UK that's opposing trans people. It stops them almost turning it's almost master and slave kind of relationship that they want. And they want to take away workers' rights, your weekends, maternity cover. They want to come after all that stuff that's been hard won by unions and people fighting for their lives to get these rights. But the equality, that the court is in their way. The European Union was in their way. And that's why, trans is just, we are just stage one. Trans kids, trans adults, LGBT people, women, and black rights. It's taking away those rights and creating this huge two-phase structure. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we will win. As I've said, I want to be optimistic. We will push back and win this. But I think the fact is that Europe, I'm lucky. I'm still in the European Union, rubbing it in again, Graham. But I think that every country that's in the European Union has challenges with the European Union on different things, but I think it's still a force for good. And I think that I really hope that once Labour is in, that Keir can sort of rip off the mask and go, ha, we're going to rejoin. I don't think he's going to do that, but there are levels of rejoining. And I think that we move. I hope it's a journey.
It's a journey. That's our final destination to rejoining the EU, full membership. And every step we take on that journey is a closer relationship with the EU.
I agree, and I think it will be good from a diversity point of view. Yeah, it will be a good thing for all rights. And I feel more secure as a trans person that we are in the European Union than not. So it has to be a good thing. And it's about inclusion, and Gen Z's coming. And they are inclusive. I work with a lot of Gen Zs in gaming companies that I work in. And, we will, because I've given a lot of negative stuff, but we are going to win this because rights always move forward. I was going to
talk about solutions. So from my experience in the 90s, I mean, a big thing was pop culture, TV. The kiss between Margaret and Beth on Brookside. That was a watershed moment for TV, And then Queer as Folk, Russell T. Davies.
I love that.
That came out while I was in university in Manchester, and we were going out on Canal Street, and they mentioned McTuckies, and we were like, yes, McTuckies. But just having a show in which the characters were gay, but that wasn't everything about them. Do you know what I mean? It was about their lives more than anything else. It was about, gay people are just like you and me, And one thing that I think really helped in the 90s, and so, I was very, very young at the beginning of the 90s, and I was growing up by the end of it. And I felt like society had changed over that time, from going from this sort of, in 1990, you associated being gay with AIDS, with being a deviant, with, no one wanted to be gay. Being gay wasn't cool. And then 10 years later, suddenly it's just normal. And everyone had a gay friend or a family member who was gay, which made it very hard to be homophobic. And this is why I love travel, because travel, I think there was a quote apparently by Mark Twain, which is that travel is fatal to prejudice. It's fatal to bigotry. And I think it is, because you've got a friend from France who's lovely. You can't just make some sweeping statement about everyone from France being terrible, because you know that they're not. If you've got friends from all over the world, you can't make judgments on the colour of their skin or their religion or their sexual persuasion. And I think one of the things with the situation now that we've got with them going after trans people is there are so few trans people comparatively compared to how many gay people there are. It's a minority of a minority. And so it's more difficult to get that kind of exposure. And this is why I'd love to see an all-trans version of Father Ted, an all-trans version of Harry Potter, just for shit and giggles, just to get that out there, because I think the humour and art and drama is a great way of getting into people's lives when they don't necessarily know a trans person themselves, but just go, this is...
But that's how Section 28 was defeated, because you know, the LGBT community put a face. There were articles. They put a face on who they were, and got into, you know, you would see gay guys making cakes at the local women's institute on a Saturday, and lots of, we got into society, and we got into the media properly, the good media, and people started to see us as human, and more people started to come out as a result of that. So more people saw more gay people, and society started to shift. And we started to get actors coming out who hadn't been out, and they were and so that was the, you know, the sort of tipping point. And I mean, that's why that, you know, the media in the UK has silenced trans voices, because they're trying to take the human side off trans people, so we don't have our voices in I mean, India were. Sorry,
I was just going to say, but we again, with pop culture, it looked like trans people were being seen more. You had the Wachowskis who made the Matrix movies. You also had Nadia, who won Big Brother one year, who was a trans woman.
Brilliant.
And it was just it was all seen as just, this is normal.
It was rolling forward.
And suddenly, 2016, if we want to pin that down as a bloody year, because why not? It was the worst year ever. That year, at that point, someone flicked a switch.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a decision in these dark think tanks that was to, as I said, well, they lost same-sex marriage in America, and it was right, we need to start again, and boom, because trans rights hadn't been established. And I think that's the same here. And there are think tanks that think about all this rubbish all the time, and have put that out. I think the putting the face on trans people here is they're kind of losing. I mean, there's a trans activist in America that I know, and my wife was chatting to her, and she was in a red state, and it's grim. And and Emma said, "Well, how do you put up with what you do?" And she said, "This is the death throes of the last dying generation with these views. This is their death. This is their last roll of the dice, and then it's done."
Yeah.
And so, there's lots of money flowing around, lots of politicians using it. I think in America, the emphasis on trans is slowed down a bit because it's not getting the Republicans the votes they want. And I think even they've switched back to immigration in full time. But I think that's the same here. I think the government will change. There will be a lull. Gen Z starts to vote. Gen Z is very accepting. And I think we are seeing pop singers that are trans, models that are trans, actors that are trans. Yeah. They are getting into their first jobs. I work with, let's say, a lot of gaming companies, a lot of trans people in the gaming industry. And I'm just seeing, you know, MI5, GCHQ, MI6 recruit a lot of trans people. And you're just seeing that happening. And I think that, you know, I think we're just that dying generation. These views will change. We're just in the last heat of the storm at the moment. And I think that will, you know, it will happen. It's just because it's a repeat of what happened with Section 28. And I think that it was putting a face on it. And
trans people aren't going to go away.
No, there are more of us than ever. I mean, it's not a, and the fact is,
sorry, before we go on, because Haley put in a super chat. Thank you so much.
Thank
Haley.
you.
That is so kind of you.
Yeah.
And she says, as a trans person, thank you for covering this. You are very, very welcome.
Very welcome.
And thank you for watching.
Yeah, for coming on. Yeah, we got viewers.
What were you going to say?
No, I think just basically the tipping point is just coming. The visibility is coming, and I just think that you know, you're seeing great allyship from I reckon you'll see a few trans flags at Glastonbury and stuff, and you'll see pop singers talking about it, and I think that, you know, they might wear trans lives are human rights, trans rights are human rights and stuff. I think you'll start to see a bit of that. We see so much kindness from some big celebrities. So I do think it's coming. We're just at that heat of the storm, and I just think that things will. But the point I was just about to make was that there are more of us than ever. They were always there.
Yes.
I
mean, like left-handed people.
Yeah, 28% in I think on that last survey, 28% of Gen Z identify as LGBTQI. 28%. You can't fight those odds. That genie is well and truly out of the bottle. Yeah. And so, you know, reinforce. You know, we do feel like I feel like the end of a war film when my regiment is pretty battered, and we are down to the last 3 bullets, and over the hill comes Gen Z marching. It's like, we're saved. Right? It does feel a bit, and it's a lot of pressure to put on Gen Z because they've got climate change and they've got all the other stuff they've got to put up with, and pensions and buying houses, which is super important. And they need, I hope that all that is going to change for them, because it's tough for them, tougher than it was when I was that age. I didn't have the pressures, but we're also hoping they'll fix all the trans stuff as well. It's a lot to put on them.
On another level, it's just so bloody disappointing, isn't it?
Yeah.
My favorite comedy writer, or the writer of some of my favorite comedies, Father Ted, Black Books, the It Crowd, the IT Crowd, to turn around and do this. And also lose his family in the process. He was married to the sister of Peter Seravenovich, who's a Scouser. He used to go to SFX. He does a very good Scouse.
Yeah.
There's a good Scouse accent in the new series of The Gentleman, Guy Ritchie's new TV series, which is so
I love the film.
It's painful. It's like first episode, sassy woman knows what's happening, it's drugs, it's everyone getting shot, it's the comedy Scousers of and there's even a boxing match.
Wow.
Okay, Guy, he's just playing Guy Ritchie bingo. Sorry, what was I talking about? I completely lost my thread there.
Gen Z's coming.
Gen Z's coming.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Like the IT Crowd and J.K. Rowling. The writer of what many people saw as a gay or a trans allegory about living, in this drab, uncolourful world, and then finding out at the age of 11 you're a bit different from everyone else, and there's this magical, wonderful, colourful thing that you need to know about. And
I loved it. I loved it when I was younger, and Emma, my wife, adores it, and she had all the books. She queued for the books in the bookshops when they were coming out. The new next. We had the films. We just bought the films in 4K, and we were like really super excited. And we'd always when she first started saying some of this stuff, it was like, well, let's separate the artist from the art.
Yeah.
Now we can't.
No, you can't.
Got rid of it all. We can't.
Plus, it helps that the last 2 of those series of unfortunate grim incidents in the nighttime with the wizard films, what they called, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, were terrible. Like absolutely god awful. I guess she can write books, but she can't write movie scripts to save her life.
Interesting. I haven't seen them.
Don't. No, we didn't go to the cinema to see them.
All right.
Okay. If you know what I mean. No one got any money from it. Terrible. But then, and Richard Dawkins, who for many years was a great sort of ally for reason, is now, he was on Twitter yesterday saying, the number of people who are intersex, it's so insignificant, you can just ignore it. And I'm like, that's like saying the number of people worldwide who are Conservative MPs is 0.00001% of the population. Therefore, we can ignore them. And technically, there are no Tory MPs. And it's like, that's like Douglas Adams, isn't it? Where he proves that the population of the universe is 0. Because the universe is infinite. The number of things that live in the universe has to be finite. Any number divided by an infinite number is so close to 0 it makes no odds. So the population of the universe is 0. It's like, and you've got people with science backgrounds sort of joining the turf side, joining the religious right.
Gives them the right. It just why do you have to have a view on it? Why just butt out of it? Leave us alone. Why do you have to jump? And it's like either they're a part of our community and they're saying nothing, which I find equally disappointing, or Stephen Fry never says anything, and it's just like, you could use your platform, and it's just, and it's the same thing. Why does everybody have to have an opinion on how such a small minority live their lives, and why do you have to just, if I don't know, I just think it either speak up in allyship or be quiet. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all.
One of the founders of Stonewall is a massive transphobe. It's just
I know that's really. There's a couple of them.
Simon Fanshawe.
It's really, really sad. The output. I mean, it's just. I don't really understand that. I mean, luckily I concentrate on the ones that are really good, like Lisa Power and Michael Cashman. Lord Cashman is amazing. You know, and Ian McKellen is obviously super supportive. And so because I'm a Trekkie, Patrick Stewart is a great ally. So, you know,
hey Rachel, how many ears has Mr. Spock got?
Go on.
3. His left ear, his right ear, and the final front ear.
Oh God, blimey!
I'm here all week. Please try the fish. But yeah, just quickly. I mean, we haven't got much time left, but
pudding.
Someone mentioned in the chat that one of their friends in school, one of the people they went to school with, was really, really homophobic, and now they met years later and they turned out to be gay. And this happens quite a lot.
Yeah.
This happened quite a lot with my generation because being gay wasn't seen as something that you could just be.
Yeah.
It was a big thing. Less so now. Do you think there's some truth in the fact that some of these people who are particularly turfy,
I do,
especially when they write under male names, let's say, I mean, do you think they've considered it and then they've recoiled from that and gone, right, that's it, I hate all trans people?
It's a good question. I mean, you know, just like all the Republicans that are, you know, I sent you that graph that shows it's the Republican states that look at the most trans porn.
Yes.
So it's just weird, right? So, but
I shouldn't be getting off on this, so I'm gonna be horrible. So people don't think. I think it's so like that in their minds. They think I enjoy watching this porn, but if I present myself as being majorly transphobic, no one will ever suspect. But it's kind of the opposite of that, because every time you see Graham Linehan go on about how much he hates trans people, everyone in the chat is just like, I bet his hard drive is absolutely chock full of trans porn.
The most unkind comments I've had in my life are from people who are not out. And then they come out later and say, and I've had a few, there was somebody on a course once that was incredible. I was on a course and they were really, really horrible to me. We were pairing off for exercises and they were just horrible. And I don't know, I can't remember. I saw them a while later on a follow-up course and they were like, I'm trans and I'm not out. And it's almost not jealousy, but then just not happy that you're living your authentic life. You're doing what, you're facing all the challenges and getting on with it. And then there are others that, I feel sorry that they feel so trapped, but, lashing out at people that have tried to do it and tried to live their lives is, it's one of those, yet another thing you have to deal with. And, if somebody's in the closet, not out, and they shared that with a trans person, the first thing to do is get love and support and empathy. I mean, weirdly, I know this sounds terrible, but if J.K. Rowling said, I was wrong, please forgive me, I do support trans people, alienated, cut off everything, wrote an article in the Telegraph and said she loves trans people, do you know the trans people would forgive him? The trans community would forgive her overnight. They just would.
The other side wouldn't.
No, they would not. But they would. The trans people, we are the most peaceful, empathy, have lots of empathy. The whole community is so loving and just wants to get on with their lives. I mean, we're not, obviously we're going to have a few that are not the greatest, but in the main, we are a community of empathy and love. And we just want to, live our lives and be part of society. And, obviously there's a lot of people who don't want us to do that. Yeah,
indeed. Okay, well, we'll leave it at that for this week. We'll come back. I want to talk about how trans people have been portrayed in the media over the years, because I think it's an interesting trope that it's disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful, and it informs the thinking of a lot of people who are now transphobic. So suddenly, I'm a born-again transphobe. Would you believe it? I didn't think about trans people all my life, and then at the age of 57, I decided to become a transphobe.
It's a bandwagon that they've all jumped on, and I think that some of the cruelest writers in the media are members of the LGBT community, which is really upsetting. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like there needs to be ways of breaking through and making people understand that this isn't just, it's not a game. These are people's lives we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And to take away people's It's not just that they want to take away people's dignity. They want to take away their existence. They just don't want trans people to exist.
It's about removing us from society. They don't want us to leave our houses. They don't rather we didn't exist, but they just don't want us there. And I think but it's not about, and you know, I'll say for the 100th time, and I will always keep telling people all the time, it's not about trans people. We are the starting block, but we are certainly not the finishing it. We're not. It's women's rights that they're after. Full Handmaid's Tale. It's not us. It's women and Black people and the LGBT community, of course. But we are the start. We're not the end.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that when we talk about the other intersectional groups in our next intersectional chat.
Captain Bart Marmot says, thanks for this, Graham. I've still got loads of questions. Well, yeah. And thanks, Rachel, as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping in the future as well, if we have guests on, if you could take the sort of the presenting role more than me.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like you've got a bit more skin in the game. I am sitting here with my beard.
There's a little bit, but I'm intersectional. I'm neurodiverse. I'm Irish. I'm a woman. I'm trans, and there's a lot more. Everybody's more than one thing, so it makes the intersectional discussion much more interesting.
And do you know what? If someone from Northern Ireland who was born in Northern Ireland and their parents were born in Northern Ireland and all their grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents were born in Northern Ireland wants to call themselves British, I'm cool with that. That's fine. You know, if they want to self-ID as being British, you go with your God. I don't mind, you know, as long as you're not hurting anyone. Anyway, big love to Joe Lefty Boater and Jeannie Bottle out there and One Angry Pagan. And Alec Burnett and everyone, just thank you so much for watching this first live edition of The Intersection. And do you want to do this again next week?
Yeah, why not? It'll be fun.
Same time, same bat channel. Cool.
Why not?
All right, let's do it. Okay, thank you very, very much, Rachel. Thank you to
You're very welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Chats. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.
Bye.